We'll get started here. So welcome, everyone. This is the meeting of the Wildlife Conservation Board of January 13th. This meeting is only specifically to consider projects that were deferred from our November meeting till this meeting to provide staff the opportunity to work with the grantees to get additional information for the three projects. And so I just want to welcome you all and thank you for braving the weather and being here in person. And thanks to all of you on the Zoom link. We do have two members here today in person, and the rest of the board members, except for board member Murray, is on the Zoom. So we'll be doing a roll call vote for each item, and we'll see where we end up. So welcome. And with that, I'll do the roll call. Chuck Bonham. I am here. Gail Miller. Samantha Murray is out. Alina Bokde.
Here.
Damon Nagami.
Here.
Fran Pavley.
Here.
Catherine Phillips.
Here.
And Catherine Moore for Senator Stern. Keith Gelino for Assembly Member Rebecca Bauer Khan.
Here.
And Candace Cotton for Assembly Member Bennett. You do have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
That's fantastic.
That is great.
Hey, just two quick thoughts. First, we appreciate the three projects' ability to carry over. We're not going to make this idea of splintering agendas and carrying over a habit. But I do think twice recently, projects have touched, frankly, bigger issues than the individual projects. And this idea of a little additional time to fine tune, think about questions, and come back for an engagement has been healthy. I think that will improve the conversation we have today. So thanks for y'all's willingness to hang in there with us. Secondly, just a note for everyone that's out at all levels of California fighting floods and the challenge of the extreme weather events. A lot of what this board can end up doing is supporting nature-based solutions, which themselves become tools to deal with extreme weather. So I know you know that. John, back to you.
Great, thank you, Chuck. So we'll get right into this. So our first item up today, unless other board members have any comments or questions to start out, or any comments, opening comments? All right, hearing none, we'll get into item number 2, building wildlife friendly resilience and working landscapes. So the way the meeting will work, we'll have staff get up and give a short presentation on the project, and then provide an opportunity for the grantees to make a few comments. And then because we'll ask the board members if they have any comments or questions, we'll work through the board members both here in person as well as on the phone. And then we'll open it up for public comment. We will go through, I have a list of speakers and speaker cards that I have right now. We'll go through that list. And then if there's anybody who has not filled out a speaker card online, that's online and wishes to speak, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. So public comment will be handled that way. And I would like to ask that public comment outside of the grantee specific part of the presentation, all the public comment be limited to 2 minutes. And we will have a timer up on the screen so you can watch the time, and I'd appreciate that. So with that, and before we get into the actual project, Scott McFarland on our staff is going to give you just a brief overview of our grant agreement and how our grant agreement is a little bit different than our standard for these kinds of block grants that we're considering today. So Scott.
Want to start off?
Oh, there it is.
All right, well, that lightened it up a little bit for me. I want to talk a little bit about our grant process because I think we had a couple questions on how we get to the point where we are with these grants and how it's believe it's fair for everyone. So about last March, we released new guidelines. And shortly thereafter, with a little bit of finagling our computer systems to get an online way to process it, by April, we released our pre-application for folks to start submitting to. Since that time, we've received over 220 applications, pre-applications, and some progress forward to a full application, some don't. The projects you're seeing here today, in order of the presentations, coincidentally, are the 7th, 9th, and 10th applications that were received. So you can see it takes a really long time with some of these bigger projects like this to develop them and work them and get them through. So our application process is open continuously. We get phone calls, folks ask for consultations ahead of time, after they submit a pre-application. Between the pre-application and full application, we're here to help assist folks develop their projects as best we can. Next slide, please. So with these type of projects, we have a history of doing them. They just aren't in the large scale, dollar-wise, that we're seeing with these. So here's a sample. I think there's a few more that I couldn't quite get out. But the important ones are some of the ones that tie into this, but a lot of these ones are working lands. So the second one up there is the Xerces Societies. That project created assessed 27 overwintering sites, designed 7 restoration and management plans, and implemented 7 restoration and management plans. The next one is really particular to our third project that we're having today, and it does tie in with the first one as well. Recovering and sustaining monarch butterfly and pollinators. That was a grant to the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts, who sub-allocated grant funds to participating RCDs from the Sierra foothills to the Pacific coast, implementing a coordinated and comprehensive statewide approach to creating monarch butterfly and pollinator habitat, provide technical assistance, and conduct community outreach on those communities. And that really built up to a good chunk of what the third presentation will be today. The other grant that they had with us previously was again with the CRCD, and they worked together with the Carbon Cycle Institute. Actually, this is the Enhancing Wildlife Habitat and Carbon Sequestration on Working Lands. They worked with the Carbon Cycle Institute and 10 RCDs throughout the state. And together with producers, the project created more than 38 conservation carbon farm plans, 10 stream flow enhancement plans, 12 irrigation evaluations, landowners, and created design plans for about 40 conservation practices that can be implemented on working state lands. And again, that's where this third project is going to bring in some of those as well. The other one I want to point out was the Audubon. That one worked to create a program in California to certify cattle ranches. And they got 6 plans completed, which related to 80,000 acres across 8 different counties in the state, and added 15 operations that graze over 500,000 acres to enroll. They're in the process of certification. Some of these groups are coming back to us for, and again, bigger ones. So you may see some of these in the future if they get through the process. But those are some of the ones I want to let you know that it's not new to us to be doing this. It's not new to the board. As you can see, some of the dates it's been here. It's just, I think the dollar amount really gets us thinking about it more. Next slide, please. So accountability was a question last time. So with all of our grants, we get progress reports with every invoice that's submitted. Grantees typically submit invoices monthly or quarterly, and some might not be as efficient as that. And in that case, we ask for quarterly reports from them. So that's our typical baseline. And then all projects, when they're done, there's a final report. With these particular projects, since we're a little bit more slightly hands-off compared to a normal project, we're asking for, or we're requiring a 6-month running list to be updated every 6 months. There's going to be a spreadsheet that shows here's our new sub-grants that we've issued. And then the next 6 months, we'll get the next list, and we'll just keep building and building and building. So we'll be in touch with all those things that they're doing, so we won't be foreign to us. And then every year, there'll be an annual report that we can publish on our webpage. We can present to the board. These partners have all agreed to come back to you at some point if you'd like to give an update to the projects that they've done. So we feel pretty confident that it's going to be successful with the other ones, the way we account. Next slide, please. There's been some concern about how we are indemnified or the risks that we are associated with when we do projects. This is standard indemnification language. It's in every single one of our restoration grants that we do. I don't really want to read it to you all, but you guys can't see it, so I guess I'm going to have to. That's right. To the fullest extent permitted by law, grantees shall indemnify, protect, and hold harmless the Wildlife Conservation Board in the state of California and their representative members, officers, agents, employees, and representatives from and against any and all claims, including lawsuits under CEQA, demands, damages, losses, costs, including attorney fees, expenses and liability of any nature claims arising out of an incident to the project. Grantees entry upon and use of the property and the performance of or failure to observe or perform any obligation of the grantee under this agreement, the obligations of grantee under this section, which is our section 9.4, include without limitation claims resulting from the generation, use, storage, disposal, release, or threatened release of any hazardous or toxic substance, material or waste, petroleum or petroleum products, and other substances that present a threat to the human health or environment.
That one sentence?
Yeah. Yeah, we're efficient that way. That was kind of my overall idea of our grants go. I didn't know if we want to pause for any questions on the process that we have now, or did you want to go into the projects?
I have two questions for you. They're kind of leading questions.
Uh-oh.
So I'm gonna try to take you to a place I think is, so say a little bit about this open dynamic. My understanding is the board is kind of in collaboration with other conservancies, kind of testing. Great point. So my first question is about the open application process. And my understanding is the board, checking with other conservancies is kind of taking a leadership role on whether there are different ways we can solicit engagement with our stakeholders and receive applications such that we improve the efficiencies and the timeliness in granting funds back out. And open process appears to be a really good tool for that, correct?
Can I answer? I'm gonna answer that. So WCB is really going back to the way we used to solicit for projects. And that was before the passage of Prop 68. Prop 68 required a official solicitation process. And that's where you would advertise for a program or a pot of funding. You would solicit projects under that. And you couldn't talk to people. You couldn't do anything. And so that really slowed down the way we used to do it. And that's kind of the way we had to go forward under that official solicitation thing. The way we're doing it now and going back to the old way is that we're continuing accepting projects in. We're working with potential grantees on developing projects, understanding projects better, actually working with the grantees to build a better project, but they're all scored, they're all prioritized. The one thing in the relationship with the Department of Fish and Wildlife specifically is really important in all of the work that we do at the board, because they provide the biological and the science expertise. Although we do have science folks on our staff, the science part and the biological part of a particular project is also evaluated and scored and prioritized by the department as well.
So without short circuiting science, competitiveness, transparency, and fairness, you're trying to accelerate the ability to send funds back out and get more work done faster, correct?
Correct.
So is block grant in the same vein? It's a potential tool rather than interfacing over a longer period of time with dozens or hundreds of entities. We ask the restoration community to self-organize. It's a poor choice of words, but almost unionize their dynamic. And through a single point of contact, we can amplify effect through one grant rather than the time across multiple individual grants. Is that fair?
Yeah. And one other point to make, Chuck, in the three projects today, all three of these projects will probably generate 30 to 50 separate little projects. And instead of having staff bring to the board each one of those little tiny projects, this is an effective way to ensure that conservation happens effectively on the ground and successfully. Thank you.
John, can you explain too how that might affect equity and the ability to get to communities that haven't necessarily been represented in our grant giving in the past?
I think all three of these projects, one of the goals of these projects are to reach those communities that might otherwise have been not, intentionally left out, but just overlooked in the past. And, all three of these grants and the grantees that are involved in these are making a concerted effort to try to advance that equity and bring it up to a level where they'll be an equal partner in, in these projects going forward.
If I could add, because I've been a project developer here as well, and I've been through the whole system, the two different systems we've had. Well, as when we originally were like we are now, and then we went through this PSN process, and now this way. So when we did a PSN, it was once a year. People would submit an application, and if there wasn't very good, they would be dismissed. We consult with them, and then we say, but you can apply next year when you make these changes. You'd send them back 12 months, and then they'd have to apply again. With this process, they can send in a pre-application. If we see potential in that project, we can work with them continuously to get this project to be a success, rather than just telling them come back in 12 months and try again. So I think it's really opened up a lot of the conversations we're having with people and our ability for our staff to provide aid to get these folks successful projects.
I really like this rolling thing that you guys are doing. It really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Did you have another question? Can I pop in with one then? Back on the account, on these grants and how they're different, there's going to be, I missed it, but there's going to be every 6 months
Yeah, it'd basically be like a spreadsheet that's going to identify what sub-grants they've given out. So in 6 months, they'll show us what they've done over that time. And then they're just going to keep continually adding more and more on that. So we'll still see those original ones. They'll keep updating the progress of those projects, and we'll see how they're succeeding.
and then annually there will be,
It's going to be more like, because with our projects, we always ask for a final report that really encompasses the whole project. We're asking these folks to do that on an annual basis to us. And it's going to be put in a PDF, ADA compliant format that allow us to post it on our web pages to show off to people. They can put it on our board materials. It just allows a lot more flexibility and keep you all in line with what's going on with these grants.
so I'm wondering, since we're giving fairly large grants and some of us are less familiar with how this is going to work and stuff, if the staff could plan to come back to us in a year's time and give us a report that might be different from what's on the website, that
No,
help us.
And one thing that we're going to do in February also is go over our year-end review, and we can make sure that we capture this information in our year-end review that we publish every year as well, in addition to coming back to the board and providing a quick overview of the success of these projects.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I want to hear the good stuff, but I also want to hear the problems so
No,
we
want
can,
you to hear those as
yeah,
well.
we can fix that as soon as possible.
Right. Is there any board member online that would has any questions about the grant agreement itself at this point? Okay. Gail Miller is now.
Sorry, John, this is Alina. Just a question on the grant agreement. How does the grant agreement address the criteria related to serving, justice communities or disadvantaged communities? So can you speak to how the criteria is developed and then kind of monitored as part of these 6 months or annual reports that are brought back?
Yeah, the way I visualize that occurring is with their spreadsheet that they're going to provide every 6 months, updating the projects. They'll identify what projects are located within a disadvantaged community based on the different tools that are outlined in their agenda. Staff will take that information when they see it in a spreadsheet to verify that those projects do fall in line with those, to make sure that we're staying on track with the goals that each individual partner has in their grant.
Vice Chair, if I could real quick. So that answer speaks to kind of effectiveness monitoring for implementation. Is it also the case that each of the 3 applicants, project proponents, is affirming an active obligation when they're redistributing to have the force of their sub-granting increase investments in disadvantaged communities per the various definitions? Isn't that also the case?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I learned something from Alina this week, that there's a difference between being in an environmental justice community or serving a disadvantaged community or environmental justice community. So in your criteria, do you make a distinction between whether a project is within a community or identified as serving a community? And if it's serving a community, how do you do that in the
Great question. I think do you want to answer, John?
Yeah, right now we're working through that process with the subcommittee of the board members to really define that, what that's going to mean for the board going forward. Right now, it's identified in the agenda write-ups, how disadvantaged communities will be handled or considered, how vulnerable communities will be considered. And then also community, and there really isn't a clear definition of the difference between within a disadvantaged community or benefiting that. We're working through that at a staff level with a subcommittee of the board members right now on that very issue. And hopefully we'll be in a position to bring back a definition, what it's going to mean for WCB going forward at our February meeting.
Then for these grants, will there be sort of some retroactive criteria put into the contracts or something to be consistent with what the WCB decides?
I don't know, there won't be anything retroactive, but I think, just working with these folks, I think, and then understanding the criteria that they're going to use going out the gate, I think we'll be in pretty good shape, or at least in a position to say that these projects are consistent with our definition.
Yeah, I would concur with John on that. I mean, the reality for these first three larger block grants is each of the applicants has a very long institutional relationship with the WCB. So I could imagine iterative conversation back and forth as these things take better shape.
And one thing about the annual reporting and biannual reporting and that kind of thing, we're going to understand the kinds of projects they're working on and soliciting for. And, we can advise them going through the process. You guys are only working in these areas. You need to focus a little bit more over here. And it's an ongoing proactive working relationship that the grantees have with staff to carry these projects out. And we can opine and advise going forward to actually affect what the board wants to do.
I don't have any further questions. I do, once we do the present, hear from staff on the specific block grant applications, but I'm good in terms of just the overall structure of block grants.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other board member comments online? All right, any public comment for the first? Alexa? Nope. No hands.
No raised hands.
Great. So let's get into the presentation of the specific project specifically. So Scott's also going to present the first one, building wildlife friendly resilience in working landscapes. Scott?
Thank you, John. I just let you know you're getting a substitute presenter today. One of our staff members worked really hard on this project, but he got pulled away to a bucket list tropical warm vacation in the middle of our winter. So I'm sure he's really regretting not being here at this moment, but I'm happy to have this honor. Okay, so here's a map of Point Blue's projects. And this has created some questions too, because it's a statewide project. And this map represents, and Point Blue can correct me if I'm wrong when their presentation goes up. This is where they've been working. They're constantly trying to go out. They have staff spread out through the entire state, and they're trying to grow and grow and grow. So this just shows you where they've been at, and they're progressively trying to get everywhere. So don't let that think that our project is just limited to these red boundaries. It's just really to highlight where they've been thus far. Next slide, please. So over the last several decades, Point Blue Science has been steadily increasing the capacity to implement conservation projects. Initially through the community, education-based students and teachers restoration of a watershed, which is commonly referred to as STRAW. program, and more recently through the partnership with NRCS. To date, Point Blue has leveraged funding, scientific and technical experience, and community partnerships to complete over 750 restoration projects, leading to over 35 miles of restored riparian corridors and 80,000 acres of sustainable agriculture. This grant would provide, or would allow them to build on that foundation to substantially increase the pace and the scale and conservation to help meet the state's biodiversity and climate resilient goals. Next slide, please. The project seeks to improve equal access to implementing wildlife beneficial practices, with half of its grant intended to serve disadvantaged communities. The map on this slide shows the areas of disadvantaged and severely disadvantaged communities throughout the state, outlined in blue, with Point Blue's areas of operation. This encompasses over 2,300 disadvantaged communities and 1,100 of which are severely disadvantaged. Through the grant, more small-scale farmers, often in underserved areas, will have equal access to technical and financial support. In addition, as a co-benefit, there is a growing evidence that smaller farmers have greater wildlife and biodiversity values than large-scale farms would. Next slide, please. Collectively, the project seeks to restore 5 miles of riparian habitat and 40,000 acres of upland habitat across at least 35 counties, with at least 50% of these activities benefiting disadvantaged communities. With this ambitious Point Blue's project management framework is operational as well as scalable, depending on the level of funding, so that the core functional components are retained at all levels of activity. Their ability to expand to the scale needed to effectively implement this grant is already in place. Next slide, please. Many of the restoration projects will be completed in partnership with the local communities through the STRAW program, where students from kindergarten through 12th grade and up through community college are actively engaged in the restoration project and learn about the importance of the watershed restoration to benefit wildlife and people. Next slide, please. The next few slides are going to give you an example of the types of restoration that would be implemented through this grant. The example in this overhead image is of a riparian restoration site with cattle exclusion and revegetation components. Next slide, please. This is another riparian restoration project showing habitat establishment over a 16-year time frame. So it's a pretty impressive change. Next slide, please. This slide shows a beaver dam analog attenuating meadow channel erosion along a 1-year time frame. Next slide, please. This slide shows another point source erosion control method, before and after. Next slide, please. The project would leverage Point Blue's leading monitoring and evaluation protocols. For several decades, Point Blue has been evaluating wildlife responses to habitat restoration and has published dozens of peer-reviewed papers. Point Blue's research and monitoring has informed some of California's foremost habitat plans, such as the Central Valley Joint Venture Implementation Plan. The tools to determine individual as well as overall project success are well in place and scalable to the needs of all projects completed under this grant. Next slide, please. This and the CRCD proposal, which will be the third one we see today, are separate yet leveraged as a package, where the grantees have been and would be in coordination to build upon their complementary strengths and areas of expertise. While they need to operate individually for administration purposes, they will be working as a collective team to accelerate natural lands conservation throughout the state at a level that comes closer to meeting the 30 by 30 goals. And next, I'm going to invite Dr. Elizabeth Chamberlain to come up and speak about Point Blue's perspective on the project, and then I'll jump back in at the end.
All right. Thank you, Scott. It's exciting to be here today. It feels like it's been quite a process over the past year, and so much thoughtful work on how to develop these projects has gone into this. So it feels really good to be here and have this opportunity to present with you today. So thank you for providing that opportunity to us. I really appreciate the thoughtful discussion so far this morning, and I hope that we can continue to address all of the questions that you've raised and talk about how we work both in and with disadvantaged communities particularly. And I want to acknowledge that we recognize that these block grants represent significant trust on the part of the board placed in the applicants. And I want to also say that we respect the seriousness with which you take that responsibility, and say that Point Blue also takes this responsibility to steward these public funds very seriously. And I know that that is true as well for our great partners at the SMP and CRCD as well. And at the same time, I want to just step back for a moment, because I've been thinking about, leading up into this moment, I've been reflecting on what a watershed moment it has been for biodiversity conservation, to see California's commitment to biodiversity institutionalized through things like CNRA's Pathway to 30 by 30 strategy, and backing that with significant financial resources, which are part of why we're here today. And I think that it's been such an impressive moment to be in conservation and see that focus on both biodiversity and equity in addition to things like climate resilience. And especially I've been reflecting on that since last month. I had the opportunity to represent Point Blue at the UN Global Biodiversity Conference in Montreal. And their key themes were emerging about the importance of community-based, locally focused restoration and action, and particularly youth-focused restoration and community action. And that has really highlighted for me that what Point Blue brings to the table today is significant based on the long history and the visionary work really of the teams that I'm honored to represent today. And so I'm excited to share that work with you. Next slide, please. Point Blue has been a leader in climate smart, multi-benefit conservation for 57 years. We are more than 160 dedicated conservation professionals, including scientists, restoration practitioners, educators, data engineers, and field biologists. We're headquartered in Petaluma, but with satellite offices, field stations, and staff embedded across California. We like to say that we work from the Sierra to the sea, along the Pacific Flyway from Peru to Alaska, in Antarctica, and most recently on coral reef conservation in the Caribbean. Next slide, please. Point Blue's unique niche in the conservation space that Scott talked about is grounded in the fact that we have both in-house recognized scientific expertise and what I like to call action arms that allow us to put that science to work. One of our most important action arms, as Scott also mentioned, is our community-based restoration program called Students and Teachers Restoring a Watershed, or STRAW. STRAW has been working with K through 12 and more recently community college students, teachers, and community volunteers directly to implement professional quality restoration practice for over 30 years. In that time, I know Scott hit some of these stats, but we've engaged an astonishing 50,000 students, teachers, and community members, restored 40 miles of riparian corridor, leveraged over 15 million in volunteer resources and match funding, and importantly, created a model during that time that prioritizes serving underserved students and communities directly. All STRAW programming, from hands-on restoration to science-based education, is offered at no cost to schools and youth participants. Next slide, please. In 2011, Point Blue expanded on STRAW's community-based approach to initiate a unique public-private partnership with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Through this partnership, we cost-share partner biologists who live and work in more than 35 counties across the state. Our partner biologists help build trust and establish deep networks in their communities. Across that 12-year partnership with NRCS, we've engaged over 1,000 farmers, ranchers, and land managers, conducted repeated standardized ecological monitoring on more than 100 ranches across California, creating a really unique data set, provided technical assistance to support conservation planning and implementation on more than 800,000 acres, and leveraged over $80 million through Farm Bill, EQIP, Healthy Soils Program, and other conservation funding mechanisms by providing direct access to producers to access these funds. And as with STRAW, this expertise is provided at no cost to producers. Next slide, please. As exemplified by our partnership with NRCS, public-private partnerships are core to Point Blue's expertise and the value we contribute to the conservation sphere. Point Blue already successfully manages multiple block grant-like funding mechanisms to support suites of projects, including a formal partnership with the Department of Defense to manage all avian data for every defense installation globally, and more locally, another with the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority to implement a suite of shoreline restoration projects around the San Francisco estuary, which provides meaningful and accessible community engagement in 6 of the 9 Bay Area counties. These public-private partnerships allow Point Blue to bring our networks, subject area expertise, and grassroots outreach capabilities to match with public resources and jointly fulfill our missions and the missions of our agency partners. Next slide, please. Building from our experience working directly with underserved communities, Point Blue has a strong organizational commitment and to DEI and is institutionalizing that commitment through our strategic planning process. We've developed an organizational DEI action plan and formed an ongoing working group to ensure our goals are met. We've developed our own community college conservation internship program that engages BIPOC community college students directly and helps provide a clear pathway into conservation careers, both with Point Blue, as we've hired several of our interns full-time, and other conservation entities. We will be able to engage these interns directly in this block grant project. Next slide, please. As I alluded to already, Point Blue's interest in this project stemmed from our participation in California's 30 by 30 efforts from their inception, and for which WCB is, of course, a key implementer. During the development of the Pathways to 30 by 30 strategy, our CEO, Manuel Oliva, who's here today, collaborated with our board member and co-chair of 30 by 30's Equity Forum, Dr. Ana Alvarez, to facilitate progress. Point Blue brings to this project our core capabilities that I've described, along with a proven track record and statewide networks to allow us to engage communities that agencies can sometimes have a hard time accessing on their own. Next slide, please. Working lands, which by definition have multiple benefits for both wildlife and human livelihoods, comprise nearly half of California, and as such are essential to achieving biodiversity conservation goals. However, many working landscapes that could support valuable wildlife habitat do not currently have adequate access to conservation resources. Working in partnership with a broad suite of collaborators across the state, including our excellent partners at CARCD and numerous individual RCDs, Point Blue has the networks to reach these communities. Next slide, please. The success of this project will be supported by decades of relevant expertise. More than 30 staff will be dedicated to the project. To date, we have engaged tribal communities in more than 13 counties, some of whom have provided letters of support for this project, served more than 15,000 underserved students, and amassed an astonishing 185 years of collective experience, resulting in all the significant impacts I've described today. Next slide, please. We will restore wildlife habitat on working lands across California and direct at least 50% of funding to projects with tribal communities, disadvantaged communities, and underserved individuals. Community engagement is at the core of how we build ecological resilience. And I'd like to note here that, Point Blue brought this target of 50% of funding directed to underserved communities ourselves and intentionally, as that is a true commitment and goal that we have as an organization. It wasn't something that we were asked to do. Next slide, please. Our block grant model includes a transparent selection rubric, a public solicitation notice, built-in free technical assistance available for applicants, and an adaptive approach. To ensure accountability, transparency, and excellence in this project, Point Blue will convene a funded multi-partner advisory committee. Committee composition will be developed to provide expertise, guidance, and expansion of our networks and ability to outreach to wider communities. Anticipated representation will include social and restoration scientists, producers and agricultural coalitions, tribal liaisons, and land trusts. We will additionally reserve at least 30% of these committee spots for representatives from environmental justice groups in order to help us reach our equity goals. To date, we've curated a database of more than 30 such organizations and begun outreach to grow connections and facilitate participation in this committee. Our reporting processes have been refined over decades of successfully meeting or exceeding the planned outcomes of restoration grants. Point Blue currently has an annual operating budget of roughly $18.5 million, over half of which is public funding managed successfully by our professional finance team. Beyond our budget, we additionally leverage roughly $13 million annually in conservation funding through helping applicants access Farm Bill, EQIP, Healthy Soils, and other funding mechanisms. Next slide, please. We've set ambitious and achievable targets for restoration success. Through our community-centered approach, we'll implement at least 230 wildlife beneficial restoration practices over the 4 years, a sampling of which you can see on your screen. Next slide, please. Reflected by our supporters for this project, Point Blue has intentionally engaged underserved communities for many years. Our goal for this block grant is to increase our ability to do so. We will therefore use a menu of strategies defined by existing state tools and policies to expand access to conservation for traditionally underserved communities, as is regionally and contextually appropriate. The map on this screen shows significant overlap between vulnerable communities and our core project area per one of these state tools, which is Cal Envirno Screen 4.0. Next slide, please. We heard concerns at the November board meeting around a perceived lack of block grant resources going to entities in Southern California and just wanted to address that concern directly. To date, we've had more than 60 entities sign on to support this block grant in LA County alone. There's a smattering of them shown on your screen, demonstrating significant need for this project in that region. Next slide, please. Project selection will be based on a rubric we developed to both facilitate project selection and allow us to track progress towards specific scoring categories. Projects will be prioritized based on their contributions to wildlife habitat and connectivity, of course, also equity and community engagement, and climate resilience and feasibility, and note that only the overall rubric categories are shown on this slide. Projects will be scored by a cross-organizational team that represents a breadth of relevant experience, which is a strength we bring to this model. Our advisory committee will guarantee accountability and transparency, meeting several times each year to help us evaluate progress and adaptively respond through targeted RFPs and other adaptive measures if we feel we're falling short in any project category. Next slide, please. Point Blue brings established strength and standardized monitoring approaches to this project. Our project monitoring processes have been heavily vetted by relevant regulatory agencies and conform to standards used by other state funders. We operate on a regular restoration project tracking cycle that flows from project design to production of as-builts, to maintenance reports, to monitoring results, and finally adaptive management planning for the following year. As required by our grant agreement, we will provide WCB with documentation on projects that Scott described so well already, projects completed and contracts awarded, and will require durability structures, including 15-year land tenure agreements. In addition to the required reports provided to WCB, we will build a web-based landing page to communicate project progress publicly. Next slide, please. We expect this project to result in significant biodiversity benefits across all major ecoregions of California, along with increased recognition of the value of California's working lands to state biodiversity goals. Additionally, we will see new and increased community engagement in restoration and conservation statewide, including direct participation in restoration by thousands of underserved students and community members, helping increase access to nature and empower the conservation stewards of tomorrow. Next slide, please. This fall, California Natural Resources Secretary Wade Crowfoot shared the quote you see around Point Blue's engagement with the 30 by 30 movement broadly. We thought it would be appropriate to end this presentation with this statement. It is. To conserve 30% of California's lands and coastal waters by 2030. The audacious is not only possible, it is necessary. And I love that. Point Blue brings the science that will help us meaningfully protect and restore biodiversity, expand access to nature, and build resilience to climate change. We have to move at a pace and scale like we never have before. Point Blue is showing, and we look forward to working with Point Blue and showing the world that people and nature can thrive together. Point Blue's readiness to do just that is why we are here today. And last slide, please. Oh, there's one more slide. There it is. Thank you to the board and to the fantastic and dedicated staff at WCB. And thank you as well to all of our partners. We could not do this without you, and we would not want to. With that, I'm again going to turn the mic over to Scott McFarland to introduce some of the rest of the exceptional team that have worked so hard to bring this concept before you today.
Thank you, Liz. So to conclude for the staff presentation, staff recommends a project as proposed. And Liz will stay here to help answer any questions. And I might mess up some names here, so I apologize in advance. But we have Dr. Libby Horzig, who is the Working Lands Director, John Parody, who's the Straw Restoration Director, Carrie Wendt, who is their NRCS Senior Partner Biologist, Bonnie Eyestone is the Rangeland Monitoring Network Coordinator, Isaiah Thalmayer is the Straw Senior Project Manager, Padmini Servisan, is that Srinivasan? Oh, I'm gonna keep butchering off. She's the Chief Financial Officer. Manuel Oliva is the Chief Executive Officer, and Ann Chadwick is the Point Blue, one of the board members on Point Blue. So I'm gonna step back and let us all answer your questions that you might have.
Great, thank you, and great presentation, Liz and Scott. Thank you so much. So with that, we'll open it up for questions from the board members at this particular time. Is there any?
I have questions, but we can't see the hands on the phone.
That's all right. Go ahead and, yeah, we'll take the board members here in person first, and then we'll go out to the phone, if that's okay, or the Zoom.
I just wanted to confirm that the staff report indicates you won't be using herbicides on any of these projects.
That's correct.
That's correct. I congratulate you on that. This is a huge undertaking and it's probably could be used as a model for other of our project applicants when it comes to how do you restore without potentially introducing something very damaging. My other question though is, the less sexy part of what we do is to make sure the money is spent properly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You have an roughly $18 million budget. Suddenly you're going to be getting $25 million roughly. Somehow when I see your chief financial officer, I feel greater confidence. But I'd maybe you could speak a little bit to what you intend to do to make sure that this sudden increase in funding responsibility, you'll be able to do all the nitty gritty on the bookkeeping, managing the books, et cetera.
I'll start and then probably pass it on to that person that you were taking a look at. And that is in fact why we brought her here today, and really grateful to have her. So Point Blue, in the year-long process that we've been working on and developing and putting quite a lot of thought into this model, how it can most benefit both our organization. It can be an infusion of positivity and resources into the restoration sphere in general, and how we can manage it, responsibly and without stress. And so we've been working on the structures that we need and the hires that we need in place within our organization to manage this growth. We have sort of two ways that we've been thinking about it. And one is that we requested a budget size that is programmatically within what we're already able to achieve within the work that we implement directly, but also the conservation resources that we are helping distribute through our staff, through the external funding that I talked about. So in that vein, this is well within what we feel that we can responsibly manage already. However, there is also significant budgetary growth, as you've highlighted, and along those lines, we've worked to make sure we're shoring up our infrastructure around invoicing and managing and financial management systems. And I'll have our CFO talk a bit more about that. And also already outlined hires that we need, especially administrative hires, to help support the additional work that will be required around managing the funds. And with that, I'll pass off to my team.
Well, thank you, Liz. So yeah, okay. Point Blue has been working with public funding now for 50+ years, and we have a very experienced team of finance staff. Like Liz mentioned, more than 50% of our funding comes from federal, state, and local agencies, so very, very experienced in handling reimbursable grants, making sure that we have the systems in place to isolate this funding and identify the expenses specifically to the sources of funding. So this is obviously a significant step up in the size of our budget. And a lot of what we've been doing in the last 1 year is taking a look at how we would handle this growth, what additional capacity we need, both in terms of administrative staff and our systems. And we have provided for that as part of our budget that we presented to the WCB. And yes, it is something that we have considered, including all the risks associated with having such explosive growth. So I'm confident that we have the structure and the staff in place to be able to deal with this. Obviously, there'll be a phase-in process as we start using this funding, but we are ready for it. And we've actually already started looking at hiring to make this process as seamless as possible.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No? Chuck or Catherine or Keith, do you have any questions? Members on the Zoom? Any questions?
This is Alina. I have a couple of questions. So for Point Blue, just in the report and also in your presentation, so use the terms like underserved, disadvantaged, and then you mentioned the CalEnviro Screen 4.0. So can you just talk to, if you can share, you've made this commitment, and I'm very happy to see that you've made a commitment for 50% of the funding to serve historically disinvested, underserved communities. But criteria definition for me is important, and so I would like to get a better understanding of what data you're going to be pulling to gauge whether a project meets the disadvantaged or CalEnviro Screen, so underserved. So I think I'm just trying to understand, how are you going to track that, and what data points or data sets are you going to look at?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, and I'll start, and then as before, I'll pass off to my team to improve my answer. I think it's a really good question, and it's one that we've been grappling with as well over the period of developing this block grant, which for us is very important to us that we leverage this opportunity not only to bolster California's biodiversity and climate resilience, but also to fill a need we have seen through our work to help overcome some of the barriers we see to building equity and conservation. And from that, our perspective is that it really takes a menu of available options to address different contextual and regional problems within California. So we don't want to use a one-size-fits-all approach. We want to use a menu of potential approaches available to us right now. No one approach is perfect, but together with a menu of approaches that we can use based on existing state tools and policies, we feel we can do the most that we can to address barriers while also tracking data as we go. And so what I mean by that is that we plan to use that menu of approaches, includes things like the DWR tool, which is something the state has been asking us to use for some time. We're also, very happy to use the CalEnviro Screen tool, which provides a different level of data that we can look at to address gaps. We also are using free and reduced lunch programs, data, something that we've been using for a long time through our community-based restoration program. And the Farmer Equity Act as well, to define underserved individuals and producers. So it's well defined within that act as well. And within our project selection and scoring process, our rubric is equally weights both wildlife benefits and connectivity with equity. And so within the more detailed scoring process that we have, we'll be tracking data on how each progress addresses not only wildlife benefits, but also our equity based on the categories that I've described. And we'll be summarizing how our project selection is scoring on that category and passing that information off to Scott. Let me see if I have anyone that wants to add. Oh, I do want to add one thing. I think something I didn't touch on that I've been thinking a lot about is that a value to this block grant model is the data set that we'll be able to collect over these 4 years. And so because we are intentionally collecting and tracking data on our progress towards how well these equity definitions are working, at the end of the 4 years, we'll be able to analyze what really worked within this statewide data set to help us address equity barriers across conservation. And so I think that that's a strength we bring as scientists, it's a strength we bring that we have attention to tracking data, and it's a strength that we bring to be able to evaluate progress afterwards and maybe help move the needle in a real way at the state level.
Thank you. Elena, any other questions?
I had a question, John.
Oh,
Yeah.
Just one more question. Sorry, Fran, just.
Sorry, yeah, that's fine.
So I know in the board report, it says that the funding for the block grant is, general fund, but it's coming, it says the habitat. The program's habitat enhancement and restoration. So is the funding that's contemplated to fund this block grant, where is it coming from? Is it the AB 179 bucket, the nature-based solutions package? Or
No.
is it coming from other, I mean, I know there's the land acquisition and habitat enhancement program for Southern California. All of those, so I'm trying to understand what program is being targeted for this funding.
Yeah, this funding is coming from the general fund pot that we got for climate resiliency. Specifically, it was provided in last year's budget and some this year's budget. And that's the pot that is coming from. It is not coming from the nature-based solutions pot at this particular time. Well, it won't come if you guys approve it. It'll come out of the climate resiliency pot that we got in, I think it was SB 179, but it was a different pot other than the Northern Natural and Working or nature-based solutions pot.
Okay.
And then the
Okay.
habitat
fine with
enhancement and
that.
restoration, that's just our general restoration program that we've identified a program at WCB.
Okay. And then I think just my final comment to Point Blue and to staff, again, just want to commend your commitment and dedication to reach underserved communities. I would encourage you to go beyond the disadvantaged communities definition, the WRD. I think that my experience has been that there's greater impact in truly reaching underserved communities when you look at multiple criteria. And so it sounds, I appreciated that you listed a number of criteria. So I would just, as you're continuing to kind of build the metrics and evaluation tool for selection of the grantees, and that you go beyond kind of one single indicator to define underserved communities. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alina. Fran, you had a question?
Just a follow-up question. I appreciate all the discussion and excellent presentations by all. I wanted to be able to answer when people ask me about the 30-30 plan. I get all the benefits on biodiversity and adaptation, appreciation for the equity questions as well. But on the 30-30 plan, because it's sort of part of this CARB scoping plan for emissions reductions as well as adaptation, et cetera, how are there protocols, or how do you quantify emissions reductions associated with the 30-30 plan? I get that question and I didn't have an answer, and perhaps someone could now or in the future help me understand that, or maybe that's more of a broader resources agency question.
I'm Libby Porzig. I'm the director of the Working Lands Group. I really appreciate that question. And one of the big things that Point Blue has been invested in for many years is understanding the degree to which these restoration and stewardship activities have co-benefits on the landscape. And so a lot of our science is devoted not only to understanding what the biodiversity benefits of many common restoration practices are, but then also understanding what the climate adaptation and mitigation benefits of that are as well. So we've led a good deal of I think, really valuable science looking at the carbon sequestration that results from riparian restoration, for example, and have published a number of papers, a number of peer-reviewed papers, and are engaging with the state in both communicating that science and also guiding further, also guiding future study and investigation. Does anyone want to add anything to that?
Are there annual reports that get submitted to CARB regarding specific emissions reductions?
Not
That
specific.
can be quantified because there have a certain percentage of emissions reductions attributed to the 30-30 plan and carbon capture and storage. But I don't think that I know of, compared to traditional emissions, that there is the protocols in place to quantify those reductions.
We, to my knowledge, and someone can correct me, aren't submitting annual reports to CARB, but we have been in communication with CARB and are very willing and happy to talk with them both about the protocols that we've designed, the science that we've conducted, and how we can work together to inform that going forward.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
Yeah, just really quick, while we're still online, Liz Damon. Just a quick comment and a quick follow-up question. First of all, thanks so much to you all and to Scott and staff for the additional information for the board from the last meeting. It was really helpful. And the discussion here has also been helpful. I also want to support Alina's comments. I also think that the criteria for which underserved communities are being targeted is extremely important. So just want to echo Alina's comments and encourage y'all, Point Blue, when you're out in the community and talking to those groups that maybe don't know about WCB's programs, not only helping and encouraging them to apply, but also circling back with WCB staff and making those connections, because we want that through line. We want these folks to be in a new pipeline for future projects for a long time to come, and just to keep building up that network. So thank you in advance for that work. I think it's going to take many of us in a concerted effort to reach out and get find those voices that haven't been represented in the past. And then just a clarifying question. Catherine actually asked a question that I had about, sort of being prepared. This is a step up in your annual budget, and just a recognition that there are 2 grants, block grants that are at up here. So we're not talking about another 25 million. We're actually talking about another 50 million. And just want to clarify that I know we're not on that next meadow restoration grant yet, but that you are prepared for the additional influx of another 50 million over the next several years, and not just 25. Thank you.
And
I just wanted to add one more thing for Damon's question about what the workings with these other organizations. Liz and I have already been talking about this when she goes and meets with some of these different organizations that haven't been associated with WCB in the past. We're going to want to come down there and go meet with them and develop a relationship. So just wanted to assure you that we're already in the process of doing that.
so, Damon, thank you. I have a follow-up that builds on your question, and this is either CFO or CEO driven, I would imagine. So I've been looking at your independent most recent audit. You follow best practices and pursue annual independent audits. And I was also just looking at your annual board report. So I see you have prudent fiscal planning. You have a line of credit, which you haven't tapped. You do have line items in your budget that are endowments. And then it looks like you split existing operations roughly in a percentage of about 80% of funding going into program. I'm rounding about 20 into administrative and other expenses. Do you anticipate to bring on this funding? You have a lag period where you have to bring on staff to deal with this increase, or you're ready to go in the spirit of Secretary Crowfoot's closing quote you used?
I can talk to the financial and administrative aspects of things, and obviously there's a program aspect as well, which many or my colleagues can answer. So yes, we are planning to add staff to manage both the block grants, so we can deal with the total of $50 million. So we have in the budget 2 specific positions that are finance related to manage the grants, the grant managers. And we're also adding to our HR staff an additional, we actually have added already a recruiting manager who's going to focus on DI-based recruiting, and a payroll and benefits manager that will add capacity to that particular function. So we are gearing up and we will be ready as we start spending out the majority of these funds.
And you would predict a similar kind of ratio, funds coming in, 2/3 of them, 3/4 of them are going out to program work, not back office. Back office is essential. You can't short that. But I'm just confirming you see a similar type ratio.
It probably will tilt more towards the programs because, obviously, finance capacity is not isn't a variable expense. It's a step expense. So we're stepping up our administrative expense, but the growth in our program expense is going to exceed that. So my expectation is that it will be much more tilted towards programs. So over 80% will go towards programs and the rest towards finance, administration, and fundraising.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, any other board member questions, Catherine or Keith? Yeah, Keith.
Thank you. So, in your presentation, you mentioned that there would be over 200 individual projects likely to be rolled out. And I think, maybe that's a note to staff. Just in the summary document, there wasn't a lot of information about the specifics. And I know that those projects are to be selected, so you don't know exactly. But some metrics that WCB could be tracking as you implement the funding. So more a comment than a question, but just something that I'd like to see for this project and for other block grant projects so that we can keep track. If you came back with only 2 projects, I think there would be a lot of disappointment. And I know your goals are much more ambitious than that, but just something that we could see that progress as the funding rolls out.
Thanks. All right, hearing no more comments from board members, we'll move on to the speaker cards. So I do have some speaker cards for this particular project. And first, remember to please hold your comments to 2 minutes. And then Alexa back in our IT room will allow you to speak. So first up is Mace Vaughn.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Mace Vaughn. I serve as both the co-director for Xerces Society's Pollinator and Ag Biodiversity Conservation Program, as well as a partner biologist with the U.S. Department of Ag's Natural Resources Conservation Service out of their Western National Technology Support Center in Portland, Oregon. And I'm very excited to have a chance here to give you, just to provide support, not just for this Point Blue project, but really for all 3 proposals before you today. I've worked, and my team at Xerces has worked closely with Point Blue and the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts and many, many RCDs for many years, for me going almost back 20 years. And they really do have a strong track record of supporting high quality wildlife conservation on working lands, as well as working with a diversity of conservation partners on the ground. And as the discussion has been ongoing just now, a growing and wider diversity of those partners. As I mentioned, I also work very closely with NRCS and highly value the financial and technical assistance available from USDA for working lands and wildlife conservation. We really feel like the current biodiversity crisis and declines in pollinators and other wildlife really necessitates that all hands on deck approach here. And I really do believe that Point Blue and CARCD are implementing some very innovative programs, providing that financial and technical assistance to support wildlife habitat on the ground across California. And yeah, just really encouraging both to listen to that presentation from Point Blue just now, and yeah, for the support that you all are considering here for these programs and expanding this work on the ground. So thank you so much for that this chance here to provide some feedback and support for these projects. And yeah, wish you all well.
Great, thank you, Mace. Next up is Kevin Boyer.
Kevin, can you raise your hand if you're online? Thank you. You should be allowed to unmute now.
Yes, hello. Thank you, everyone, especially to the board for giving us this opportunity this afternoon. My name is Kevin Boyer. I am the program director at the Regenerative Agriculture Foundation. And I have been supporting Point Blue as a grant maker for a decade this year in their partner biologist work. It's something I believe in strongly, mostly because of the way the partner biologists are embedded in the local communities. It really gives them the opportunity to work with a diverse group of producers, getting great work done. I have to say I appreciate all the questions you've had around diversity and inclusion, as that's something that's top of mind for our foundation as well. I just want to express my support for the value of this block grant to allow them to do the work they've been doing and do more of it and do it with more and different people. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Carminder Brown.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm the executive director of the San Benito Resource Conservation District. I'm fairly new in that role, but I've been working at the intersection of agriculture and conservation in San Benito County and surrounding areas for more than 10 years, and in other parts of California for more than 20 years. The San Benito RCD provides education, outreach, and assistance to landowners and land managers, including underserved farmers and ranchers, to address soil and water quality, climate resilience, ecosystem health on private and public lands. We're one of the smaller RCDs that benefits greatly from block grants as a way to build our organizational capacity. In recent years, as coordinator of the San Benito Working Landscapes Group, I collaborated with Point Blue on several restoration projects on working lands in this region. And I am so happy to be here today to talk about how great their program is. I have personally witnessed the effectiveness of the Point Blue Straw program in increasing community engagement and restoration, specifically with underserved communities. San Benito County is very under-resourced in all manner of ways, and Point Blue has been able to provide otherwise lacking outdoor hands-on science and nature experiences to our local school children. To give you an example of what our district looks like, 81% of the students in the Hollister School District are Latinx, 88% are BIPOC, and 66% of our students are considered socioeconomically disadvantaged. Our free and reduced lunch statistic is also 59%. So I'm so excited about the possible expansion of Point Blue's work to more restoration sites in our county and to reach more of our deserving local students. The San Benito RCD looks forward to building on our existing relationship with Point Blue to achieve shared goals. We are ready to help connect Point Blue with local farmers and ranchers who have already signed up with us as having an interest in riparian restoration. And we also work with a number of other local and regional partners, and we can connect Point Blue to those folks as well to help increase the impact of their proposed work. I also wanted to point out is I think it's fairly obvious that Point Blue's work will also be highly complementary to the great work proposed by CRCD in their proposal, which will be later on the agenda today. Both of these exciting block grants are really critical for us in San Benito County to address a gap in funding and capacity needs to implement habitat improvement on the ground. So thank you very much for considering this.
Great, thank you. Moving on to Paul Martin.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Paul Martin. I'm over in Petaluma, and I've worked with the straw program for the past 30 years. The first project they did was on my place, and I'm quite proud of that fact. I'm also absolutely stunned with how the program has grown, and that indicates to me that there's a strong desire among landowners to engage in conservation activities. However, oftentimes the landowner's intentions may be good, but the resources required to perform it are not readily available or are difficult to access. And a key factor in my mind in conservation is gaining access to the land where work can be performed and pulling diverse communities together to accomplish a common goal. I believe the Point Blue team is well suited to do this. And that's because of one fact in particular, and that's their reputation. It's a reputation that's been gained over several years of working with landowners from all communities, and has led there to be an attitude of trust by the landowning community for the Point Blue team. It's that trust and the endorsement by Point Blue for particular projects and the support that Point Blue can provide that will make this entire project work. So in my mind, I support fully the project as proposed by Point Blue. I think they have the ability to be a proper steward of the funds that you hopefully will award. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you, Mr. Martin. Next up is Mina Carrillo.
Hello. My name is Mina Carrillo with Organic Farm Solutions and Barron's Microgreens, also representing some of our partners here in Los Angeles, the iconic Mel's Fish Shack, Better Youth, Smiles for Miles, and Valley Produce. I'm here to speak in support of Point Blue's block grant because it will help enable important work like ours. Because of Point Blue's conservation science, we can achieve our goals, our visions in helping our fellow Angelinos. Our vision and goals are to empower kids to kids and community. Our mission is to be a leader and a role model organization that practices and provides education for wildlife habitat and preservation, as well as being the leader in providing healthy education, healthy food alternatives, community gardens for inner city youth, the elderly, and disabled citizens, improving wildlife habitat on our farm and local community and in the inner city communities. Our farm is a wildlife habitat and conservation farm. We are a USDA CDFA certified organic 100% microgreen farm. Also, we are a minority, Black-owned, disabled veteran farm in the West Coast, working hand in hand with local and inner city communities, connecting inner city kids to nature. There is wildlife also in their inner city, and also birds, bees, flowers, and trees, including in Compton, the Crenshaw District, East LA, Inglewood, Watts, and South Central LA. One of our biggest interests is hand-in-hand education. It's the goal, and in our vision to also in heavily food desert, food insecurity areas. One of the parts that we're really part with working with Point Blue is the pollinators that they want to plant in these areas, gardens, wildlife habitat, education on cooking healthy alternative foods, building community gardens so we can create healthy communities. And I am extremely honored to be a part and speaking in partnership with Point Blue and working hand in hand also with Tracy from Point Blue, which is extremely helpful. Thank you.
Great, thank you. The last one is Thad Walker.
How's that, Barb?
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Thank you for letting me come and speak. Thad Walker, District Manager for Butte County Resource Conservation District. Here to support all 3 block grant applications in front of you today, but I'll just come up and talk once. CARCD and Point Blue have strong track records of science-based on-the-ground conservation and collaboration with partner organizations. Butte County RCD has collaborated with both applicant organizations on many projects and has great confidence in both organizations to administer public funds with a focus on disadvantaged communities. We look forward to the opportunity as part of the CARCD grant to work in part with Farview Farms, a small Butte County-based nonprofit that will implement pollinator plantings and conduct work days for students about the importance of restoration and working lands in Oroville, California. Through the SMP Point Blue Climate Smart Meadow Restoration, we plan to apply for funding to implement restoration at Butte Creek House Meadow, which WCB is currently planning the funding for. This is CDFW property, which supports the largest run of Wild Spring Run Chinook in California. Also, we look forward to collaborating with Point Blue on the building wildlife resilience and working landscapes, which will assist small landowners in implementing conservation on working lands in Butte County. I appreciate your consideration of these applications. Although you only have 3 grant applications, these block grants will capitalize on established, strong network of partnerships across the state. We look forward to collaborating with these partners to increase the pace and scale of conservation in California. Thank you.
Thank you, Thad. All right, that's all the speaker cards I have. Alexa, is there any hands raised that wishing to speak?
There are no hands raised.
Great. So, board members, what's your pleasure?
Anybody want to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve the grant application.
I'll
And
second it.
Perfect.
Great, thank you. So I'll do a roll call vote. So Board Member Boakday,
Aye.
Board Member Bonham,
Yes.
Board Member Miller, Gail Miller, Board Member Nagami, Board Member Pavley,
Yes.
Board Member Phillips.
Aye.
Great, motion passes. Great, thank you. Congratulations. So moving on to item number 3 in the agenda. This is the Climate Smart Meadow Restoration Project, and Judah Grossman on our staff will present. This is to consider a block grant also to Point Blue to do work in under the Sierra Meadow Partnership area within the Sierra Nevada mountains. So Judah.
Judy, you better make this good. I understand it might be your last presentation ever to the Wildlife Conservation Board because you've promoted.
That's
To
true.
state
I'm moving on to
parks?
State parks, but boomerang things happen, so you never know. But
Yep.
for now, this is my last presentation.
Okay. Give us your last best shot, Judah.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so thank you very much. This proposal is to consider the allocation for a block grant to Point Blue Conservation Science to advance meadow restoration activities in 23 California counties. The map that we see here shows red polygons indicating those 23 counties, and they are situated in the Sierra Nevada and Upper Cascade Mountains. I'll be presenting a brief overview of the block grant as I did at our last board meeting, and then I'll hand it over to Ryan Burnett with Point Blue to elaborate more on the block grant. Next slide, please. So this will be well familiar to the board members. As you know, in a nutshell, meadows provide a lot of important ecosystem services, including improved water quality, flood attenuation, carbon sequestration, and wildlife habitat. Unfortunately, in California, a lot of our historical activities have impacted those meadows, including logging, overgrazing, road building, and water storage construction. Next slide. We can improve and enhance the function of meadows through restoration activities that restore those natural hydrologic processes. For example, beaver dam analogs and grade control structures can help capture sediment and direct flood flows onto the meadow floodplain where they can support wet meadow habitat and recharge groundwater aquifers. Next slide. Point Blue Conservation Science is a critical member of the Sierra Meadow Partnership. And that partnership is a collaboration between private and public entities that are working to increase the pace and scale of protection and restoration of meadows in our Sierra Nevada mountains. The proposed block grant would include potentially restoring up to 6,000 acres of meadow habitat and completing planning activities to support implementation of an additional 4,000 acres, as well as assessing at least 2,500 acres of meadow habitat to identify future restoration opportunities. And so without further ado, I'll hand it over to Ryan.
Great. So thank you, Judah, and thank you to Wildlife Conservation Board staff and to the board for making the time for this special meeting to consider this block grant. As Judah said, I am the Sierra Nevada Director at Point Blue, but I really stand before you today as the chair of the Sierra Meadows Partnership. And I really stand before you today representing a wealth of people and the culmination of decades of work of dozens of organizations to protect and restore the vitality of the headwaters, wetlands in the Sierra Nevada. Our Sierra Meadows are emerald jewels in the range of light, and they are in dire need of our help. Next slide. So healthy Sierra wet meadows are ecosystem workhorses. They represent only 2% of the Sierra Nevada landscape, but we like to say they punch far above their weight. Indeed, the water you drink and that was used to grow the food you eat likely flowed through a meadow before it got to you if you live in California. And if the meadow was healthy, it purified that water, kept it cold, and stored it a little longer into the summer until you needed it most. Work recently completed by our partnership found that healthy Sierra meadows store a large amount of carbon in their soils, securely below the surface, 6 times more than surrounding forest soils. Healthy meadows are biodiversity hotspots, supporting rich wildlife and plant communities, including a disproportionate amount of the special status species in the Sierra Nevada, from sundews to sandhill cranes, from Yosemite toads to golden trout. In this period of rapid climate change, healthy wet meadows can be powerful tools to lessen the blow on the Sierra ecosystem and confer greater resiliency. Next slide. Since we're all here talking about wildlife, and I'm a wildlife biologist, I thought I'd just reiterate again the importance of Sierra meadows for wildlife. All 3 of the endangered bird species that breed in the Sierra Nevada are dependent on wet meadows. One of them in particular, the willow flycatcher pictured here, is critically endangered and on the verge of extinction. And many of our amphibian species are now federally listed and near extirpation, and they're dependent on our wet meadows. Our migratory deer herds use meadows extensively during fawning periods, and our iconic endemic trout rely on the clean, cold water that emanates from our wet meadows. Healthy meadows are incredibly important to preserving wildlife populations in the Sierra. So why are we here today? Next slide. Healthy meadows really are truly amazing places, but here's the bummer. We've messed them up. Over the last 150 years, we've built roads and railroads in all the wrong places. We've overgrazed them. We've suppressed fires with them. We've systematically removed riparian shrubs and trees mechanically and through the broad scale use of herbicides to remove them. We've killed beavers and dynamited their dams. We've built reservoirs, you name it, we did it. This degradation has significantly reduced the ecological benefits that we need meadows to provide, now more than ever. Healthy meadows are problem solvers, and unfortunately, degraded meadows are often sources of ecological problems. Sources of erosion and poor water quality instead of water purifiers. They are sources of atmospheric carbon instead of sequesters. They are biodiversity deserts instead of hotspots, and they're prone to carrying fire through a watershed instead of being natural fire breaks. Next slide. Because of the great ecological value of meadows and the unfortunate state that they were in, a broad coalition of those passionate about Sierra Meadows came together starting in 2014. These efforts led to the formation of the Sierra Meadows Partnership in 2016. And at that point, we set a 15-year goal to restore and protect 30,000 acres by 2030. our own 30 by 30 goal. We didn't have any idea back then that 30 by 30 was going to be that cool a thing. Next slide. So the partnership now is comprised of a 16 organization management board, including NGOs, state and federal agencies, and private corporations. We have a governance charter that guides our work, and there are over 40 entities that are regularly participating in the Sierra Meadows Partnership. Our management board is open to any organization that wants to join. We really have a big tent inclusive approach to the partnership. Next slide. So we have developed a strategy to achieve our 30 by 30 goal that is publicly available on our website. The goals that are outlined in this plan align closely with state priorities under Pathways to 30 by 30, the Climate Adaptation Plan, and state and water and wildlife action plans. Next slide. To date, as of 2022, I don't have the updated this last fall's numbers, but we had restored over 3,000 acres. We have 5,400 acres that are shovel ready or in the process of being implemented, and another 2,900 acres that are going through the planning process. We've also protected, thanks largely to the Wildlife Conservation Board, another 4,961 acres through conservation easement and fee title acquisition. Next. So while we have increased the pace and scale of meadow restoration across the Sierra, it is not enough to reach our 2030 goals. We now have a backlog of projects ready to be implemented and that need environmental review. Through this block grant, we are poised to greatly increase the pace, nearly doubling the restored acres we achieved in the first 5 years of the partnership and building the pipeline to push us through our 2030 goal. Importantly, the grant would allow our partnership to realize efficiencies by planning ahead and spending far less time fundraising and competing against each other for limited grant funds. This large potential investment by WCB will help us leverage additional dollars to support this work and has already drawn a lot of attention from both public and private entities that want to get involved in this big endeavor. This grant will advance important meadow science, community engagement, and other technical assistance to improve meadow restoration outcomes and increase their durability in the face of climate change. You heard about straw in our last grant. Straw is a part of our Sierra work. We'll be doing a lot more straw work under this grant. This grant will also support indigenous communities and their priorities for meadow conservation and stewardship, and help them more authentically engage, help them more authentically engage in the Sierra Meadows Partnership. Next slide. So we recognize this block grant as a significant investment by WCB and places a considerable amount of trust in Point Blue and the Sierra Meadows Partnership to deliver for the people of California. There are a number of components that ensure accountability. I think I skipped one of my slides. So first, we have a transparent and objective approach to selecting projects. We're basically doing a public solicitation with this. The S&P Management Board has developed the criteria. We modeled the criteria that we will use to evaluate projects largely off of WCB's approach. We have developed a rubric to score projects based on their impact, durability, whether they are including our wetland and riparian area monitoring plan protocols that WCB helped fund the development of, whether they authentically have DEIJ elements, whether they have community engagement and support, whether those projects are ready to go. We don't want to sit on this money. We want to get up moving. We've also have 10% of the funds set aside for tribal groups. So tribal groups and BIPOC communities, underserved communities can access all of this money, but we're planning to set aside 10% of it only for them. And then we will do outreach work through those existing partners we have and new ones to make sure that they get that money. So they get to jump the line and be in front, because we often know if they don't get it. And the S&P Management Board will work directly with these tribal groups to develop projects and bring them forward. Next slide. So here we are, accountability. So we do recognize this block grant as a major commitment from the state of California, from this Wildlife Conservation Board, and putting a lot of trust into Point Blue and the Sierra Meadows Partnership to deliver for the people of California. So there are a number of components that we put together that help ensure accountability. The established S&P Management Board will be responsible for project selection. And that group has over 250 years of experience in meadow restoration and conservation. They know a good project when they see it. We have developed transparent project selection criteria, as I mentioned before. They're based on SMP's or WCB's selection process. The grant agreement will have extensive reporting that Scott walked you through earlier. And all restoration projects will be required to implement the Sierra Wetland and Riparian Area Monitoring Plan protocols to quantify ecological benefits. At Point Blue, we have been driving quantifying ecological benefits of restoration for a long time. These projects are going to be the gold standard for how you do that. Development of these protocols was funded by WCB and were developed by the experts in the field. And also, restoration projects will be required to have a 15-year agreement to maintain the benefits and provide WCB and Point Blue access to the site for that duration. These projects have broad funding support from over 20 entities already. SMP and Point Blue have a track record of working with WCB and delivering impactful restoration projects, and we plan to knock this out of the park because we want to partner with all of you for the next 30,000 acres. Next slide. We really do see the SMP sees this block grant as a logical next step to continue to build the partnership between SMP and WCB to restore these emerald jewels. WCB is now the largest funder of Sierra Meadow restoration. We are eternally grateful for all of your guys' support over the last 5 or 6 years for this work. And really is important work to restore these emerald jewels, our vital headwater wetlands. So SMP goals are closely aligned with actions identified in a number of state initiatives that I described before by 30 by 30, the climate adaptation strategy, water and wildlife action plans. And many of the projects we will implement have had previous investment, as Thad mentioned, from WCB. You have seen many of these projects before. You funded their planning. In fact, WCB is currently the leading funder of SME projects, having invested $23 million since 2017 in 27 meadow projects across the Sierra. So with that, I say thank you for this opportunity to present to you today, to be considered for this grant, and I'll pass it back to Judah.
Yeah, next slide, please. This is really gratifying to be part of this grant, this block grant for meadow restoration. I think it's pretty clear. You can see the example that the stylized image of unhealthy versus healthy meadows, and the restoring meadows has such profound impacts both at the immediate location of those meadows and then more broadly for California in general, through water quality and carbon sequestration and so on. I was also really pleased to see the direct quote from Secretary Crowfoot in the previous presentation. Secretary Crowfoot also specifically called out the opportunity that block grants allow for increasing pace and scale, which we hear about every day in this line of work. So it's personally really gratifying to be part of this block grant presentation. And then on a softer note, I've also really enjoyed my time with WCB in advancing our mission and our conservation work here. And I couldn't think of a better way to wrap things up. So staff recommends the project as proposed. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have. Ryan, do you want me to introduce the folks or would you?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Unless you want me.
Yeah, then I won't mess up anybody's names. There we go.
All right, so Brent Campos is here. He's our Northern Sierra program leader. Dr. Liz Chamberlain, who you've met already. Padmini Srinivasan, our chief financial officer. Manuel Oliva, our chief executive officer, and Ann Chadwick, Point Blue's board chair.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great, thank you, folks. Any board member questions?
I just had one quick one. Just wanted to reconfirm the application says there will be no herbicides used on these projects. Is that true?
That's correct.
Thank you.
This is Alina. Just 2 questions again. John, the funding for this grant is coming. I know it says General Fund Program California Forest Conservation. Is this coming from the Stream Flow Enhancement?
It is.
Program? Okay. All right. And then to Point Blue, just want to lift up the 10% set aside to work with tribes. Just very much appreciate that effort. As I think in your presentation, as you said, if you're not intentional about where the dollars go, it usually doesn't reach the communities that have historically been marginalized or left out of many of these funding programs. And so just want to thank you for setting aside 10% to work with tribes. And I know also in the presentation, you said that there will be some assessment related to the diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I look forward in the annual reports to hearing more about that and how that's getting, how that's impacting the work you're doing in the community and just the broader partnership up in the Sierras. So thank you.
Thank you. Chuck, did you have?
I do have two questions. So the staff report says the remaining 10% of sub-awarded funds will be prioritized for projects developed with California Native American tribes. First question, just confirming from your view, that's not limited. So someone need not be a federally recognized nation or not. Your perspective is all comers. So rancherias, big, small, no barriers within the context of our sovereign nation partners.
Absolutely no barriers. In fact, I've lived in Plumas County for a long time and worked very closely with the Maidu, who are not, at least some of their bands. And so they are a big partner for us. And so, yeah, no, it's that we intentionally wrote indigenous communities to not put any barriers on it.
Okay, which in our staff report, the next words are and tribal organizations. And I was going to ask, could that could include, say, the Maidu Summit Consortium, which is, it's almost a corporate entity than a nation.
Yeah, I think they're a 501c3 actually in California. So yeah, that is who we have been working with closely at places like Tasman Koyam,
okay,
and others. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
All right, any other board member questions? All right. So I do have some speakers that would like to speak on this particular project. Maya Greenwood.
Hi there, can you hear me?
You can.
Great. Good afternoon. My name is Maya Greenwood, and I work for American Rivers as the Associate Director of California Conservation on our Headwaters Conservation Program. I'm providing in common and support of the Climate Smart Meadow Restoration. So my organization, American Rivers, is a national nonprofit, and our mission is to create a future of clean water and healthy rivers everywhere for everyone. In California, we focus on source water restoration and protection, which largely includes meadow restoration in the Sierra Nevada. And as you're likely aware, the Sierra Nevada provides water to more than 75% of Californians. And healthy meadows play an integral part in this, providing surface flows, groundwater storage, and water quality benefits. American Rivers has been in the meadow arena for over a decade. We co-founded the Sierra Meadows Partnership and co-led the development of the Sierra Meadows Strategy, which aims to protect and restore 30,000 meadow acres by 2030. We currently serve as a member of the S&P Management Board and are motivated to guide this investment and deliver the outcomes proposed under the grant. There's much work to be done in Sierra Nevada meadows. It's estimated 50% of the meadows are degraded, and we need healthy meadows. To me, the most important function of healthy meadows is resilience to climate change. As a millennial, I spend a lot of time thinking about climate change in my future. I make a lot of decisions based on hope and fear. Restoring meadows not only gives hope, but it's action. Meadow restoration and healthy meadows are capable of addressing the impacts of climate change by tempering peak flows, sequestering greenhouse gases, supplying groundwater storage, and providing climate refugia. There's no doubt this grant will increase the pace and scale of meadow restoration. S&P members have already cumulatively restored and protected over 16,000 meadow acres. We are an established community of meadow experts poised to take action and further build our community. This grant will allow us to spend less time competing for funds and more time working on the ground and scaling our impact together. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Maya. Next up is Alicia Wiseman.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to speak in support of this block grant and thank you guys for your consideration. So my name is Alicia Wiseman with the South Yuba River Citizens League, also known as Circle. And I'm here on behalf of both Circle and the Sierra Meadows Partnership Management Board to express support for the Climate Smart Meadow Restoration Grant opportunity. This opportunity will increase the pace and scale of much needed meadow restoration across the Sierra Nevada, which is imperative with a rapidly shifting climate. Restored meadows are more resilient to changes in climate and provide benefits that will help alleviate climate concerns, such as increased carbon and water storage, just to name a few. And I'll keep it short and sweet. With that, I'd just like to thank you for your consideration again, and we appreciate this opportunity.
Great, thank you. I have no more speaker cards. Alexa, is there any hands raised?
There's one hand raised. Oh, two.
All right, do you want to call them out, please?
Yes. The first would be John Barrett. I'm allowing you to speak now.
Thank you, board, for the opportunity to speak. I wasn't planning on speaking to this grant, but having worked with Point Blue, I just want to take the opportunity to express how grateful I am. I am the district manager for the Resource Conservation District of Tehama County. We currently are working or have worked on 6 WCB grants. One of them is the implementation of Child's Meadow project. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to just talk about pace and scale. One issue that we all face is pace and scale, being able to get this work on the ground as quickly as possible. Ryan and I have kind of worked through the difficulty of getting grants, getting it on the ground. And I see that this grant as an opportunity to really hit the ground running, get out and implement good work on the ground. And so I really implore the board to support this project. And I'll keep it short and sweet and say thank you.
Great, thank you, John. Next, Alexa.
The next is Carrie Monahan.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for holding this space to talk about the Climate Smart Meadow Restoration Project. My name is Carrie Monahan. I am the program director with the Sierra Fund, and I am on the management board for the Sierra Meadows Partnership. And I just want to say excellent presentation, Ryan and Point Blue. They've done a wonderful job supporting the partnership, and we are really excited to be included. We see this as a smart way to get projects on the ground and focus our time, energy, and resources where it matters, which is making an impact on the landscape. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Carrie. Anyone else, Alexa?
There are no more raised hands.
All right, any additional board member questions? All right, do I have a motion?
You had me at Yosemite Toad. I move to pass this.
I'll second.
Great. All right, board member Bookday,
Aye.
board member Bonham,
Aye.
board member Miller. Step away. Board member Nagami,
Yes.
board member Pavley,
Yes.
board member Phillips.
Aye.
Great, motion passes. Thank you, board. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Point Blue. All right, that moves us on to item number 4, our last item in the agenda for today. This is the climate resiliency through habitat restoration. That's to consider a grant to the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts in California. Scott will also present the project this afternoon. Scott.
Thank you, John. Hello again. I'm again your substitute speaker. This proposal is to consider the allocation for a grant to the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts for a cooperative project with partnership of state, federal, and local agencies, tribal nations, nonprofit organizations, local communities, landowners, and volunteers to increase the pace and scale of habitat restoration throughout California. Next slide, please. In this context, much of California's habitat and their associated species are in peril mainly from habitat loss and climate change. These unprecedented conditions are being met with ambitious policies and actions to meet this situation. California's 30 by 30 initiative is a clear example as part of the governor's 2020 executive order to accelerate the use of nature-based solutions to conserve 30% of our lands and coastal waters by the end of the decade. This project intends to provide a vehicle for such acceleration by leveraging the recent funding legislated to WCB to expand the pace and scale of habitat restoration. The California Association of Resource Conservation Districts, serving as a hub of the statewide network of resource conservation district, has successfully managed two previous block grants, as I mentioned in my earlier presentation, funded by WCB. Here, they would be expanding on the scope of those conservation and building on the previous work by leveraging the network of the RCDs and their partners. At least 40% of the RCDs collaborating on this proposal already plan to engage with underserved communities in their projects. To help accomplish this, California Association of Resource Conservation Districts already has an in-house justice and equity, diversity and inclusion program manager to help direct these resources to historically marginalized farmers, ranchers, and community members. The RCDs, an existing statewide network covering more than 95 districts across the state, have been connecting with and serving local communities for generations and have evolved with the changing needs of the California diverse communities and conservation needs. Utilizing diverse partnerships, they work at a ground level to build better communities, economies, and a better environment. As a grant recipient, CRCD would manage the overall grant and subcontract with multiple RCDs and their partnerships to carry out the specific projects throughout the state. The RCDs would invoice and report to the California RCD, who would then seek reimbursement from the Wildlife Conservation Board. Next slide, please. The process works because we've already successfully administered the two previous block grants with the RCD. The networking inherent to the grant structure would improve access to technical information, training, and collaboration through partnerships as per their areas of expertise. The preliminary work, such as outreach, scoping, assessment, and planning, that often take up a project's time and budget, are already in place. In this way, WCB operates one project that becomes many projects. Next slide, please. The overall project goal is to implement up to 120 projects. At least 60 of these projects would restore habitat for monarch and other pollinators on a combination of public and private lands. About 20 habitat restoration projects are planned, also on a combination of public and private lands. The RCDs also plan to implement at least 40 carbon farm plans, most of which were developed from their previous WCB block grant. As well as other opportunities arise, additional carbon farm plans would be developed, and given enough time and funding, implementation would be under this grant. Next slide, please. These next few slides show an example of project types. This one is of a riparian restoration adjacent to an agricultural field. Table in the insert is a planting plan to support the restoration work. Next slide, please. The image on the left is an overhead representing another riparian restoration plan, and a soil map on the right for a project to determine the water capacity and subsequent revegetation success. Next slide, please. Many of the projects would include establishment of hedgerows, which are an effective strategy for providing pollinator habitat and habitat connectivity along and in between agricultural fields. On the left is a hedgerow planting design with an example of an established hedgerow on the right side. Next map, next slide, please. With over 80 years of outreach and conservation experience, the RCDs and their partners, coordinated through the California RCD, are in an excellent position to begin restoring habitat at economies of scale. Funding made available to empower a long-standing network of RCDs efficiently distributing the funds to the projects leads to an unprecedented opportunity to restore hundreds of acres of habitat and achieve the associated biodiversity and carbon sequestration benefits to effectively address 30 by 30 goals. It's going to be the end of my presentation. I'm going to pass it over to Nancy, who you all met at the last board meeting. Nancy Wall Shurich, I'm going to mess names up again. which is a shame. I've known Nancy for, been working with her closely for over 3 years, but she's the Deputy Director of the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts.
Hello again. We're going to recycle the slides that I used the last time in terms of images, but since we did do a presentation on this the last time, I thought that what I would do is use these basically as a vehicle to answer the questions that I believe that the board had the last time round. What we recall and what we've been hearing is that you're particularly interested in how we selected RCDs and partners to collaborate on this proposals, how RCDs select local farmers and ranchers and local entities to work with, and how disadvantaged and underserved stakeholders benefit from this funding in general, and then also as well as reporting accountability, although I think that Scott covered that pretty well. So first of all, I just want to go back to that our overall goal through this proposal, which we do believe is in line with the purpose of the funding the state made available, is to be a part of California achieving 30 by 30 and to get as much habitat on the ground and as much carbon sequestered in the soil as possible, as quickly as possible, while at the same time ensuring that disadvantaged communities benefit directly and indirectly from our work. Funding RCDs with proven experience and expertise, a large number of whom plan to engage directly with disadvantaged stakeholders, ensures that we'll achieve this overall goal. So getting into how we selected RCDs to participate in the proposal, when we learned of the funding opportunity, an email was sent to all member RCDs inviting them to participate in an initial meeting to discuss the opportunity to collaborate and our overall goal that CARCD envisioned. Those RCDs that were interested submitted summary proposed project descriptions and budgets, as well as information about planned or existing engagement with underserved, disadvantaged, and or historically marginalized stakeholders, including farmers, ranchers, and tribal communities. To participate in the collaborative proposals, RCDs must have demonstrated their project implementation capability in past projects where they worked on the ground with local stakeholders to get conservation work done. Just proposing a project in this way was particularly helpful to smaller RCDs who just don't have the capacity to devote the many hours it takes to write a full grant proposal like this, and getting to share resources with the other collaborators on the grant makes it possible for them to get more done with the limited resources that they have. Non-RCD partners were asked to join as subcontractors / consultants to provide their particular expertise to help all or most of the RCDs included in the grant to achieve their goals and to amplify the overall impact of the entire proposal. Next slide, please. So now getting into RCDs and how they reach and select farmers and ranchers to work with. First, just a reminder that as public agencies, RCDs are accountable to their constituents and boards of directors, and therefore conduct project selection in an open, transparent manner. Because many of the projects in the proposals, the proposal one at this stage have identified landowners and local partners. We'll be providing more detail on outreach and selection as the grant progresses, as Scott mentioned. Also, when WCB funds RCDs through this block grant, WCB is funding local entities. RCDs have deep connections in their communities. That's where they are. That's where they live. They work with farmers, ranchers, park districts, school districts, and others who rarely, if ever, have the capacity to apply to funding programs. When grant opportunities are open for the general public, RCDs have a proven track record of helping get the funds to them through their outreach and education. Examples include through SWEEP, HSP, or the Xerces Habitat Kit program, where they provide assistance in applying and implementing the grants. RCDs also play a key role in connecting farmers and ranchers to EQIP through outreach, education, and assistance with implementation and practices. RCDs also recognize that the DAC maps alone don't fully capture underserved individuals or communities. And they found that they can more equitably support underserved community members through efforts that more accurately identify them, such as programs that, number one, engage with a high percentage engage schools with high percentages of free and reduced lunch students, provide targeted outreach to historically underserved and socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, support partners who focus on equity and have connections in underserved communities, and consider other regional and county assessments of underserved communities. CARCD has included budget in the proposal specifically for our JETA program manager that Scott mentioned, who was hired with NRCS grant funds. Her focus is on strengthening RCD capacity and effectiveness in reaching out to and assisting underserved farmers and ranchers. And one of her tasks is managing a block grant through NRCS in collaboration with 19 RCDs, specifically meant to identify historical barriers for socially disadvantaged, limited resource, beginning, tribal, and veteran producers, and find strategies to overcome them. By WCB funding our proposal, this will serve as a perfect complement, providing flexible implementation funds to implement those strategies. Next slide, please. When we met in November, I described the accomplishments of the 2 block grants that CARCD got from WCB, and Scott did as well. So for the sake of time, I won't get into the details again now, but I did want to emphasize again that we're going to build on the accomplishments that we achieved under the WCB grants as we move forward and work on this in the current proposal. And that really means that we're getting extra bang for WCB's bucks. Next slide, please. So though this chart illustrates the benefits to all involved of the collaboration enabled through our proposal and the economies of scale that we'll achieve. And I'd like to tie that into how this project benefits disadvantaged and underserved stakeholders. The project will create and enhance wildlife and sequester carbon on working lands and public lands in economically depressed areas. Most RCDs serve rural, urban, and suburban economically disadvantaged communities, and all of them engage in ways that ensure grant funding remains in the communities that they serve. Just a few examples from some of the RCD proposals that are part of our project include providing technical assistance for habitat implementation to historically underserved small-scale Spanish-speaking farming, Spanish-speaking farming community of Monterey County, building on a partnership with the North Fork Rancheria of Mono Indians to expand pollinator habitat established by the partners in Madera County, providing technical assistance to develop pollinator habitat in urban gardens and urban settings in San Diego and Monterey counties, and engaging with high school students from disadvantaged communities in Yolo, Butte, and San Diego counties. And those are just a few examples. I didn't want to take 7 hours to talk about all of them. Finally, it's widely accepted that the most severe harms from climate change fall disproportionately upon underserved communities who are the least able to prepare for and recover from heat waves, poor air quality, flooding, and other impacts, no matter where they live. Moving quickly to implement the projects outlined in the proposals will make a meaningful impact, benefiting all Californians, especially the most vulnerable. RCDs are uniquely positioned to begin work without delay on this crucial effort. Next slide, please. So I think that I was going to use this slide to really talk about reporting and accountability, but I believe that Scott really has done a good job talking about that. But I just did want to emphasize one thing. Number one, just to remind you that all the list of funders up there, those are all block grants that we've already managed. So we have a good track record of doing this and systems in place. And then I just wanted to talk about the fact that, we provide progress reports along with our invoices that we send to WCB on a monthly or quarterly basis. And they always explain the activities performed by task and relate them to specific deliverables. And we'll be providing the RCDs with a template that's going to include a vehicle for them to do a really good job including narratives, specifically on the activities involving and benefiting disadvantaged and underserved farmers and ranchers and community members, particularly at the direct level where they're actually working with folks. And with that, I think I just wanted to open it up to questions after Scott gets back on board.
Yeah, I should say the formal staff comment. Staff recommends a project as proposed, and Nancy and myself will be here to answer any questions. And also Cam Tredenick, the Executive Director of the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts, is here as well to assist.
Great, thank you. I do want to make one point, though, in the agenda. So in the staff recommendation, it says allocate $19,218,000. That number should be $19,413,000. It's consistent with the budget. The budget that's in the proposed project funding breakdown totals up to $19,413,000. So there was a typo in that staff recommendation. So with that, I'll open it up to board member questions.
I had a question, John.
Yeah, Fran.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation, and especially the last group who I think has made that presentation twice before us. So I appreciate that, having that extra time for us to absorb these 3 items on today's agenda. I was curious if the RCDs, because they're not that common in Southern California, especially LA County, ever have had relationships in administering grants and managed block grants with any schools or school districts or state parks? That was a question I had. For schools in particular, because of the urban heat island concerns, and state parks because they never seem to have enough money for restoration, especially ever since the last budget crisis.
Absolutely, RCDs and many of the block grants that I have managed do involve schools, and they do work with parks, with state parks. And in particular, the RCD of the Santa Monica Mountains recently through a COVID-related grant that our CRCD offered, had a specific program reaching out to schools in LA County in the urban centers, working with them on how to find nature. I think it was pointed out by one of the public speakers that, you know, there are flowers and butterflies in cities, and the RCD worked to help the kids during COVID. They managed to do this, learn how to engage with nature on their own blocks. And that's just one of because the RCDs are local, they know the schools, they know who to talk to. And we don't have an RCD right in LA. We wish that we did, but we don't. We do have folks in San Diego, a very strong RCD in San Diego. And up in just right above LA, we have RCDs as well. And I hope that answers your question.
Yes, to some extent. I was on the Santa Monica Mountains RCD many, many years ago. And a follow-up question is, some RCDs like Ventura County, I think they weren't around for several years, and they're now, I think, back up and running. Every RCD is different. 10 million people in LA County, which is a big county. And so anything you can do to link up with state parks and some of our school districts who are really concerned about the extreme heat adaptation, that would be very helpful. So thank you for that consideration.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. One of them is for staff to clarify or help me understand. One of the Point Blue projects includes RCDs, and then this one includes RCDs, or is all RCDs. Is there an overlap, or is it like totally separate? If you're an RCD and you're applying to the Point Blue, you're not also going to this grant to get additional funds, or how does that work?
No, they're different projects.
They're totally.
But we are collaborating with Point Blue on this project, in that Point Blue will be help training RCDs on how to monitor certain types of wildlife habitat. But the projects that are under the WCB grant are separate from this.
Separate. Okay, thanks. And then as we asked Point Blue, this is I don't know what your annual budget is. You may have mentioned it, but I don't recall. But this is a significant grant. How does it fit into your normal accounting, and how will you have to adjust if you have to adjust?
Yeah, we have a long record of managing grants, and we're managing, if you looked at the number of projects that are being managed right now through CRCD, we just finished the pollinator grant, and we just finished the other WCB grant. So we already have good capacity and experience doing this. However, we are really excited about the implementation of a new grant management software program, which is really going to streamline how we're able to collect and report our the expenses and deliverables that the RCDs provide, which I think is going to really streamline. I feel like it's going to take less time for us to do the monthly and or quarterly invoicing and reporting to WCB with very many more RCDs than it did with what we currently have, just based on that. And we also are bringing in additional staff to back that up. But we're not worried about this at all.
So you are bringing on additional staff to help. Okay.
If I could. So just remind me, you are the association, so you're a 501c3,
Yes.
correct? Is your board members, are your board members representatives of individual RCDs?
Yes.
Okay. And the RCDs themselves are publicly created entities under California code?
Yes, and they have their own members, and they have to have public meetings and go by the rule that I just forgot the name of.
And in total, how many RCDs are there in California?
There are 95, about 20 of them are inactive,
Okay.
and 76 of them are members of the.
And in the
association.
materials, I see you have approximately 42, my word, enrolled for this grant,
Yes.
correct? Okay, thank you. Thanks for that.
And then my other question has to do with, I appreciate that you've said in the proposal that you will be using, or staff has explained that you will be using herbicides, and then you've attached and filled out the herbicide questionnaire. I noticed that there was, when we got to the question about glyphosate, there was a reference from Penn State extension. And so I punched into Google, because saying that this Penn State extension says that basically there are no, that glyphosate is less persistent in the environment. And that's contrary to what I've been reading in more recent research. And so I punched into Google glyphosate soil persistence, and came up with lots of different studies, including some that indicate that it's more persistent depending on what the temperature is, what kind of soil it is, how often the glyphosate is applied, et cetera, et cetera. It's also pretty well known that glyphosate has a negative impact on pollinators, insects, certain kinds of insects, bees among them. It has had an indirect negative impact on monarch butterflies, because it's where glyphosate has been used. Glyphosate also suppresses milkweed, which is the principal food of monarch butterflies. So for me, it doesn't make sense to use glyphosate in any kind of restoration where the goal is to try to bring back monarch butterflies. But I'm also concerned about as you've heard me say before, probably, I'm concerned about the immediate and long-term effects of glyphosate on wildlife, invertebrates, vertebrates, et cetera, et cetera. We just had 2 grant proposals come before us for these block grants, where, coming up to $50 million worth, where they're able to do the projects without using herbicides. About 30 of your partners, RCDs, aren't going to be using herbicides. I'm wondering if you can kind of help me understand, why are those 12 saying that they need to use herbicides and the other 30 don't have to?
Sure. First of all, the use of any herbicide is just one of the tools in the toolbox that RCDs use to get habitat on the ground as quickly as they can. And then glyphosate is one of the tools within the tools in that toolbox. I am not a scientist and I cannot answer these questions scientifically. I know that we have RCDs in the room and also online who are experts in this, who can address exactly what you're talking about. But I just in general want to say that all RCDs understand and utilize IPM, integrated pest management, which certainly keeps you from applying any type of herbicide or pesticide in a place at the time when pollinators or other beneficial insects would be present. And RCDs live and breathe in order to create habitat, protect wildlife and protect the environment and make the planet safer for all of us. So they don't go out willy-nilly spraying glyphosates around without thinking about it. And so I'm comfortable as a grandmother and a mom with these projects going forward and trusting the science that the RCDs will be implementing if they do choose to use glyphosate. Is it okay if RCDs chime in at this time with a more scientific answer? Or would you like to save that for the comments time?
Well, I was just wondering why 30 of them can do it without herbicides and 12 need herbicides if they're essentially the same projects.
Well, I would think it would depend on the particular ecological conditions of the areas where they're working. We're working all across the state and there are different invasives in different parts of the state. And I think that glyphosates are particularly useful in fighting some of the pest plants that would inhibit the growth of native plants that we need to get this work done, which would be why they would be deemed necessary by the RCDs.
Man. Yeah, there's no.
I'm remembering that we had the wonderful presentation from the expert from CDFW at the last board meeting. She would have be able to do a way better job discussing the science of this. But as I said, the RCDs can get more into this if you would like them to.
Several RCDs are aligned could be commenting on this particular issue as well. We have 2 RCD managers in the room who might be able to address it too.
Okay. One quick question just on administrative dynamics. So like the prior to block grants, does this block grant envision an every 6-month roster and tracking spreadsheet?
Yes.
And in that every 6-month dynamic, presumably the 12 projects or the 12 RCDs out of the 42 would be rostering and identifying, including those things that could end up using this tool.
We could include information on that in the template easily. And, you know, like I said, there is the questionnaire that WCB has provided that they all would be using.
Okay, thank you. I imagine we have a long list of RCD spokespeople. And perhaps we ask those when they come and make their comment to offer a response then, and we can come back to the board members. Okay. So we'll do that way. And I think I might have jumped in the queue, Catherine, if you have additional questions.
No, that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's go to board members that are online. Do you have any questions for project proponent on this agenda item?
This is Alina. I just have a question for John. Again, on the funding of the 19+ million. The program says habitat enhancement restoration. Where is the funding coming from to support this proposal?
It's coming from the climate resiliency pot. So it's the same pot of money that the first grant is being funded under. It's not the natural and working lands piece this particular time.
Okay, so the nature-based solutions, it's not.
Right, it's not that funding, it's a climate resiliency funding.
Okay. And given the outcome of this vote, for our February board meeting, you'll be able to obviously share with the board where we are on the funding for that program in terms of the balance.
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Damon, Senator Pavley, Gail, any questions?
I think we lost Gail. All right.
John, you want to go through speakers, but then we'll come back to follow-up questions.
All right, so the first speaker up, list of speaker cards is Heather Barinkoff. And remember, 2 minutes if you can, unless you're answering a specific question from a board member, that would be helpful.
Okay. Tuikapteo and Nepo Heather Bernerkoff Tiak. Good afternoon. My name is Heather Bernerkoff. I'm Yoemi and I live in the Southern Sierra Miwok lands. I'm a founding partner of the Walapu Uchutu Butterfly Home Place project, working with the Mariposa County Resource Conservation District and the Southern Sierra Miwok Nation. The resource conservation, the Walapu Uchutu project is a part of this larger request that you're considering. We were fortunate to have received a smaller grant from WBC in 2020. With those funds, we over-delivered on expanded habitat and community engagement. Of the 13 expanded habitat locations, 50% were on properties where people live under the poverty level, which included one Habitat for Humanity home, a tribal allotment land, and elders' homes. We created a pollinator team, hiring 2 young Southern Sierra Miwok women who were underemployed. One of these young women was so inspired by the work she applied for and was hired at the National Park Service as an intern to work on meadow restoration and native engagement. The pollinator team excited the community, and to this day, we all continue to receive notifications of monarch sightings from people excited about being part of the monarch survival story. And this means more citizen scientists. That is extraordinary reach for a small grant. More important, in terms of WPC's goals, the work resulted in an increase of our monarch butterfly relatives. In September 2021, for example, the first monarch in 10 years was seen in my area. By March of 2022, we had caterpillars on my ranch for the first time in 11 years. We also expanded existing early emerging milkweed habitat, almost doubling the number of plants. In addition to monarchs, we saw an increase in 8 other butterfly species and many native bees, including the sighting of 2 female crotchets bumblebees, a now rare species of concern. All of this was only possible with the support we received from technicians enabled by the WCB grant. You funded it and we delivered. As Indigenous people, we are also overrepresented in a variety of negative economic, health, social, and services and criminal justice indicators. In the recent catastrophic Oak Fire, for example, of the 127 homes that were burned, 10% were Native households. When we have, my comments were written for a little bit longer speaking, but essentially the native plant habitat that we're installing is resilient and it helps pollinators, people, and the planet. People were very displaced from the Oak Fire. And I encourage you to vote yes to funding the CRCD project. They've been great to work with, and together we get things done. Thank you, relatives, and thank you for your work. I appreciate you all.
Thank you, Heather. Next up is Tara Fauch-Moore.
Wapu Matrixusu. My name is Tara Fauch-Moore. I'm the council secretary and project manager for Southern Sierra Miwok Nation. Our tribe has partnered with the collaboration of Heather, you just heard, with the Mariposa RCD to implement our Walapu Uchutu habitat restoration program. Southern Sierra Miwok Nation is a non-federally recognized tribe and thus has incredibly limited resources. Nonetheless, we continue to carry our knowledge, and in the past few years, we've been building out really robust stewardship and TEK programming, including pollinator habitat restoration, but also other land stewardship and food sovereignty efforts. This particular grant, we really encourage you to support because it's incredibly important to our people for a variety of reasons. One is, beyond habitat restoration for pollinators, it also will support our own cultural preservation, as many pollinator plants have cultural, medicinal, and food uses. It will also support wildfire resilience in our community. Mariposa County has been hit hard by wildfire, not limited to the recent Oak Fire, and native plant restoration is crucial to our own climate and wildfire resilience. And lastly, it will provide economic opportunity for our tribe. The past grant created 2 new jobs, and future grant funding will create new job opportunities for our tribal members who have trouble living in a California home and being able to live in their homelands. It will also support our tribal nonprofit. And yeah, and it just will pair greatly with our other land stewardship, fuels reduction, cultural burning, food sovereignty. We're building out a tribal conservation corps, and this will all really help our people redevelop and reclaim our roles as the original stewards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Moving on to Mace Vaughn.
Mace Vaughn is not online.
Okay. Next up is Chris Chu.
Chris Chu is also not online.
Okay, next up is Christopher Wagner.
Yes, hello, this is Chris Wagner.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yes, sir. So I just wanted to speak on behalf of the Tehama County RCD about our wild cattle removal project. We believe there's a lot of value added to this project, not only because of the current state of the habitat being deteriorated by the wild cattle. We also believe that that wild cattle is continuing to hurt the water runoffs by polluting within those waterways. There's also been pushing away of the natural animal habitats and their migratory patterns. So these wild cattle are really trying to restrict deer movements and other migratory patterns of natural animals in those areas. And it's also restricting a potential for professionalized cattle operations, which is obviously highly regulated and professionally monitored. And being able to accentuate this project will allow these opportunities to be able to take place on that land.
Great, thank you. John Barrett.
Hello, I spoke earlier. Thank you, board, for the opportunity to speak. My name is John Barrett. I'm the district manager for the Resource Conservation District of Tehama County. As I stated earlier, we have successfully or are currently working under 6 WCB grants and have successfully collaborated with CARCD on numerous grants. I wanted to take the opportunity to thank CARCD for to work with us as we were able to use this opportunity to have our younger kind of up and coming grant writers be able to start drafting grants. Our project specifically targets wild cattle in and around the Issue Wilderness. The issue with the wild cattle is that they're desecrating the land, the water for spring run Chinook. They are preventing the Tehama deer herd, the largest herd in California, from being able to migrate into winter and summer grounds for food source. They also bring with them disease for cattle ranchers around our underserved community. And I implore WCB board to support this project. Thank you.
Great, thank you, John. Next up is Amy Garrison.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi. Good afternoon, board. My name is Amy Garrison. I represent the Tehama County RCD. I'm here today to show our support for the CARCD block grant. The Tehama County RCD does have a long-standing history with CARCD and the Wildlife Conservation Board planning and implementing projects in wildlife habitat and restoration and conservation, community education, engagement, and many other projects that address small and large scale natural resource needs in our underserved community. Our board of directors is made up of local community members who volunteer their time to ensure a local voice in natural resource issues With this funding, the RCD will be able to reduce habitat degradation on 27,000 acres adjacent to the Lhasa National Forest, the Issue Wilderness, and adjoining public lands that is home to numerous sensitive plant and wildlife species, such as the Tehama deer herd, which is the largest migrating deer herd in California. I want to thank the board for this opportunity to give our support for this collaboration and look forward to supporting and partnering on more restoration projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. That's all the speaker cards I have. Is there any hands raised or anybody else on
Yes.
Zoom that would like to speak?
There are a few hands raised.
Okay. Go ahead and call them out, Alexa.
Brittany Jensen, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for your time today. My name is Brittany Jensen. I'm the Executive Director of the Goldridge Resource Conservation District in Sonoma County. And I just wanted to say that we've participated in the last 3 Wildlife Conservation Board sponsored block grants through CARCD. And these grants have been instrumental in providing rapid, flexible funding that has allowed the RCD to respond quickly to emerging conditions and opportunities. Most notably, our 2021 sub-grant agreement to focus on monarch overwintering habitat arrived just after the reports of significant resurgence in the Thanksgiving New Year's counts, which received widespread media attention and provided an ideal time to conduct outreach and garner support among overwintering site landowners. We were able to perform rapid assessments to prioritize sites for restoration, develop plans for priority sites, and even begin to implement plan recommendations on one high-value site, all within the short 2-year time period of the sub-grant agreement. Additionally, the block grant structure significantly reduces administrative costs for the RCDs, allowing for greater collaboration and providing flexibility and making sure the highest priority projects get supported. I also wanted to address one of the board members' questions earlier. So there is an RCD in the Santa Monica Mountains in Los Angeles County. And we as an RCD in Sonoma County work with almost all of the schools in our district through different projects, either through taking them out through farms and habitat sites, through our field trip and education programs, as well as supporting their school gardens and wildlife habitat projects. Thank you so much for your time and considering this item.
Great, thank you. Alexa, next up.
Next is Catherine Holmes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks so much. This is Catherine Holmes from Solano RCD. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. At Solano RCD, we're very excited about the opportunity to work with local school districts and ranchers and farmers to implement monarch habitat. I did want to speak just briefly about the herbicide question that came up earlier. And I feel I want to point out that, in fact, the different projects proposed by the RCDs are, in fact, quite different. Some RCDs are working up in the Sierra Nevada, where invasive plants there's much less pressure from invasive plants. And some RCDs are doing things like cattle removal projects that are not as dependent on actually controlling weeds and installing milkweed. So at Solano RCD, we always do our best to minimize use of herbicides. We use careful timing. We use selective targeted applications. Whenever possible, we use manual methods as well as herbicide methods. We use glyphosate only occasionally and in a very limited nature. Basically, what we're trying to do is control invasive annual grasses that are quite dense and hard to control, things like ripgut brome. You can tell from the name, it's a tough one, you know, and there's some oat species that are very difficult to control. And using glyphosate to get those annual grasses under control opens up the space for us to then put in forbs and milkweed successfully. So our goal is always to minimize our use of herbicide. We use it briefly for only a year or two. And then once we tip that balance into establishing native forbs and native grasslands, we don't need herbicide ever again. So I just want to address that, and we're very excited about the possibility of greatly increasing monarch habitat in Solano County, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up.
There are no more raised hands.
No more, okay. Oh yeah.
Hi there, my name is Chris Rose. I'm the current Executive Director for the Solana Resource Conservation District. And I wanted to maybe take it back just a little bit as far as just generally speaking to how excited we are at the opportunity of doing something on this scale with CARCD. I have been working for RCDs in Audubon, California for over 25 years. Worked for 3 different RCDs. I'm the current Executive Director of Solana RCD and have been for 15 years. We've done a lot of different projects. We have 50 different projects right now at Solana RCD. Many of them working with students, bringing them from disadvantaged, underserved areas out into the field to our sites, and also working with tribes and doing habitat restoration and being hired by Yochidihi, the Winton Nation in Solano County at this time. I'm just really, really excited about this opportunity because it also is this opportunity to bring RCDs together and for different RCDs and different levels and capacity to help each other as well. We have a pretty large capacity. I've been doing a lot of projects for a long time, but other RCDs don't necessarily have that same capacity. It's also a different model in a way to actually do more projects and spread that wealth throughout the different RCDs throughout the state. And also maybe make it a little more efficient for WCB since you wouldn't have to have necessarily 10 project managers managing each one. We were going to apply for a WCB grant to do the projects that we have joined to do anyway, but I'm much more glad to do it as a group with CRCD than doing it alone.
Great, thank you. So I think we're done with speakers. I have a question. So Scott, would you be the project manager for implementation on this grant?
No, I would be supervising the person that will be doing.
Perfect, even better. So I like the upside of a block grant. We've talked about that. However, over in the other arena of individual grants, a thing we have discussed is our staff's ability to set clear expectations with individual applicants about the filtering process, our expectations for prudency, and using glyphosate as a last tool in the toolkit, not a presumptuous first and only tool.
Correct.
Is that a fair characterization?
Very fair.
Would you expect that you as supervisor and the individual staff will interface with both the association and the individual 12 to set that expectation as you're going through implementation of this block grant?
I'd be happy to do that.
Actually, I will guarantee that, Jack. We will involve, we will engage in that.
Because I think a thing could be that when you're doing this block grant, the 12 RCDs who think they may use that tool haven't had a fulsome engagement with us at the staff level yet to understand how we want to work through that as you're designing a project. Now, some board members may be comfortable that you still end up using the tool. Others may not, but I would want our staff to be having that conversation during implementation. Does that sound fair?
Very fair.
Okay, thank you.
If I might make a comment?
Sure.
Could that be part of the reporting that
Yes.
the board gets back as who's actually used it?
Yes,
if they have?
it'll be in the tracking sheets and we'll be able to put that on the report too. So certainly be able to see it.
Thank you.
Yep. And I just wanted to go back to one little step. You perked one of their interests. It's a little bit of a sidetrack, but it goes back to some of our earlier conversations about our old application process and where our new process is now. When we were going through those competitive solicitations and you saw some of those grants come through and there was herbicide in there, we were very limited in the consultation, the way we could redirect those grants to where they needed to be. Now, Catherine, we're meeting with these people very early on in the process. And if you're seeing herbicide, we've talked to them about trying to reduce it as much as we can. And sometimes it's not possible. We're really able to have those conversations and they're all very well aware what the board's concerns are with this.
Any other board member questions? No, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the grant as proposed in the staff report. Of course, my mic wasn't on, but I think I'll make the motion.
And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Great. So Board Member Bookday,
Aye.
Board Member Bonham,
Yes.
Board Member Miller, Board Member Nagami,
Yes.
Board Member Pavley,
Yes.
Board Member Phillips.
I think in the application, there's some misleading information about glyphosate and what it does. One of the things that really stands out to me is it's said it's among the least toxic to humans among herbicides. And I think Bayer would disagree with that, given their $10 billion payout to thousands of folks who've had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and other diseases as a result. I appreciate what this grant is trying to do. And I like RCDs generally, but I'm not going to be able to vote for this one. So I'll just keep my vote off.
So you're abstaining or voting no? Abstaining. Okay, we have 4 yeses and 1 abstention, so the motion does pass. Great, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, be safe when you drive home.
And I do have some last minute comments.
John and Chair, just very quickly, I know we talked a lot about with these 3 grants reporting back on an quarterly basis or 6-month annual basis. I think all of them are going to report back annually. I would like to, if the board is in agreement, at the first meeting in 2024 to have an update on the broader issues of how just how the block grant is going, and particularly for the interest in how many of the partners or subgrantees are fitting into the category of disadvantaged or underserved, what the criteria is that's being used to define that. And then I think for this third one, also understanding with the RCDs, which ones are using glyphosate. I think just these key issues that we've discussed today, I would like to ask that there be a presentation back on how these 3 grants block grants are kind of hitting, the targets or addressing the concerns to the board. So rather than just being part of the website or having just staff review, I would like to have those presentations. So if that's the pleasure of the board, I'd like to at least recommend that.
Okay.
And Alina, if I may add, if they would add at that report next year, early next year, a map to show where those grants are being used. So we just sort of get a sense of how this is being implemented. I'm very interested in if it's all on lot on federal land and how that's going to be taken care of in the long term. But a map always helps me. I think I'm a visual learner, so I'd appreciate that next year, that comprehensive sort of overlook on how it's implemented statewide and where are we missing opportunities.
Absolutely. I'm a visual learner also, so I'm would appreciate the map as well. So
Okay. Yep, we can definitely do that.
okay, thank you.
So I just have a couple more quick things. Just first and foremost, thanks to the board, thanks to staff, and thanks to our grantees for being here today in person, also on Zoom, and for your participation, and looking forward to implement these projects with you all. And unfortunately, Judah's left the room, left the building, I think, because he walked out so briefly.
Right.
So, but I do want to go on record, and I just want to thank him immensely. Judah is an exceptional employee for WCB, as all of our employees are. But Judah, he came in from the private side and really embraced the state bureaucracy, but really worked to his advantage to make it successful for the projects that he worked on. And we're going to miss him. He's moving on to the Department of Parks and Recreation for a promotion. But as he said earlier, you know, as opportunities come up here for at WCB, he may come back. So we look forward to having Judah back here at some point in the future. The last thing, departures, I announced to my staff earlier this week, and I want to let the public know I'm going to retire this year. I'm going to be, my last day will be the end of March. So February 16th will be my last board meeting. And I won't go in, I won't say anything about all that stuff now, but I will talk at the February 16th a little bit about my tenure here. And and the last thing, the board members will be receiving a memo or a letter from me later, and then probably next week or the week after, reminding you about the Form 700 and the ethics that you guys need to fill out and complete if they're not up to date. And you're definitely your Form 700 by April 1st. So with that, I think we can adjourn the meeting, Chuck.
Great. Be safe, everybody. See you soon.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.